Welcome to the ECTRAS webinar about understanding EMC on radio products. My name is Henrik Bosbøl, and I'm Director of ECTRAS TRS. I'm also Manager for Department in Struer. I will make a short presentation of ECTRAS Test and Reliability Service so you better can understand who we are. After that, David will take over and tell about radio EMC standard, common pitfalls to avoid testing radio EMC, combined radio and non-radio equipment, what to prepare before testing, and in the end, we will have a Q&A, and then I'll have some small announcement. ECTRAS AS is the mother company. The ECTRAS Group is containing of 3 subsidiary companies. 2 of them is placed in Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. And in Denmark, we are placed in Viborg, Struer, and Hvidovre. In Viborg, we have the administration project management office, and we have our sales office. And in Struer and Hvidovre, we have our accredited and pre-compliance testing labs. In Ivano-Frankivsk, we have our project management, our development department, our prototype production, and our manufacturing. About ECTRAS TRS. ECTRAS is established in 2007, and we have 2 test houses, one in Hvidovre and one in Struer. And we are accredited by DANAG, and we are accredited to a lot of different standards, also the standard that David would like to talk about. Because we are accredited by DANAG, we must be an independent department from all the other companies in ECTRAS Group. There must never be doubt about our credibility and compatibility. And what can we offer? We can test according to a lot of different standards, and we can do pre-test and accredited test, such as EMC, radio, climatic, and mechanical test. We can also do safety test, hall test, but that is not accredited. But ask us. We will always try to see what we can do for you. It was a short presentation for ECTRAS, and now I will give the microphone to David so he can continue. David Busk is also our lab manager, and he is also our radio specialist and radio tester. If you have any question on our presentation, please write it in Zoom, and we will answer it under Q&A. And if you cannot answer in this webinar, we will write a mail to you with the answer. I shall also mention that this webinar will be recorded. David, please take over.
Yeah, good day. I'm David Busk. And I would like to talk about radio EMC. So that is radio modules inserted in devices. I've quickly shared the Article 3 of the Radio Equipment Directive. So the Radio Equipment Directive have different areas for which assessments should be made or shall be made. So we have 3.1a, health and safety. That's RF exposure and safety, as in low voltage directive. We have Article 3.1b, that is EMC. We have 3.2, efficient use of radio spectrums. That's what we would normally call radio tests. And we have Article 3.3, that is other requirements. Amongst those are cybersecurity, where my colleague Alexander spoke about this some weeks ago. But what I would talk about today, that's EMC. That's part of 3.1b. And it directly says in the Radio Equipment Directive an adequate level of electromagnetic compatibility as set out in Directive EMC Directive. Here I've looked up the EMC Directive. And that basically say do not disrupt other equipment, and you shall not be disrupted by other equipment. That is basically emission and immunity. So for the radio, so for equipment with radio, we should look in the EMC Directive also to how to comply and assess the equipment. So how do we show an adequate level of EMC for radio devices? That is by following the 301-489 series of standards. So there have been made standards that say how you should test on a radio device, how you should assess and everything. To the right, you can see an example of a front page of one of those standards. 2 seconds, I will admit an additional person. So the 489 series, I've listed some of the most common standards, and in 99% of the, maybe 95% of the cases, it's these standards that are used for normal. In those standards, they say a lot of things that I will speak about later, but it's basically emission test and immunity test, as you see, as many other EMC standards. So it's basically the same idea, but you will see related to a radio. So what is special about the 489 series? They have the basic things that like test plans, test levels, and test limits. That's kind of like other standards. But then they define arrangements of test signals. So what do you do with the companion device? Communication link, what should it be? Should it be wireless, coax cable? What should the modulation be of the companion device? And they also talk about what the signal should be, like the power level from the device. I will admit another one to the meeting. And it speaks about the signal to receivers, where it gets a little complicated compared to other standards. The signal to the receiver wasn't defined in previous standards for 5 years ago. So that's kind of a new thing where they say, okay, what should the signal level be at the receiver? You're just not allowed to have an place the EUT just at the side, the companion device and the EUT next to each other, because then you'll have too good a signal. It has to be at a certain level, so we can compare it between test laboratories and have an adequate level of immunity. The 489 also talks about RF exclusion bands. So that means that's frequency ranges that are excluded from assessment. And these are applicable for both emission and immunity tests. And lastly, we have the performance criteria where they speak how should we assess this radio link. And an important thing is that there should be no unintentionally transmissions. And that means that basically that the immunity test has to be, if you have a transmitter, then the immunity test has to be repeated where you check that you are not transmitting unintentionally. So the 489-1, that's the common technical requirements. All the other standards are pointing to this standard. It speaks about using a suitable companion device with normal modulation. It talks about standalone receivers and transmitters shall be tested separately, and transceivers shall be tested in both directions. And this is one of the errors we often see that I will speak about a little later, that we get a device where we are only testing the transmitter. The manufacturer, the client comes to us and we are only testing half of the device. For example, only the transmitter, only the receiver. The 489, it's like the standard you have to use if you don't have a specific standard for the radio. So if you don't have a specifics for other standards, then you have to follow this 489-1. And for example, they have that your maximum 40 dB minimum usable receiver signal level. So that's basically where we turn the signal down so we can't see anything. That could be with a step attenuator. So we see a link failure, and then we turn the power level 40 dB up from there. And then for the UT transmitter should transmit at maximum power. And then the 489-1 speaks about minimum performance level. So that's how it should continue to operate as intended. So this basically covers all the other standards, all the other 489 that points to this. So they say, okay, it should some general rules like continue to operate, no unintentional change in operating states, and so on. And it's divided in continuous phenomena and transient phenomena, but that's like radiated immunity and conducted immunity is continuous phenomena. It's something that could be always there, and transient phenomena is something that could occur not all the time, like an ESD pulse or surge pulse. So I will talk about one of the first important standards, that's 489-3. That's ISM devices. So that's devices like in the 433 megahertz area, 868, or 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz, that's not Bluetooth or Zigbee or Wi-Fi. They have another standard. So it's devices that's not wideband modulated in those areas. Again, use a suitable companion device. Then comes one of the important things, that the transmitter capable of operating in more than one frequency band, testing shall be carried out on each band separately. And that's quite interesting for a 489-3, because when you test on 868, you have a lot of different bands. So this standard actually says that you should assess in each band. The test signal level, as I spoke before, we had 40 dB in the common standard, but here they specifically say 30 dB in method 1, and then they have another method talking about separation distance. And I think that's mostly due to NFC and RFID, where it's difficult to put in attenuation between the signal, because you're basically placing the NFC tag on the NFC reader. So they have made another method for us to assess this. This signal level, in most cases, it's only for the radiated immunity in most standards. Also in this particular standard, 489-3, it's just for the radiated immunity. All other tests should just be representative of the EOT's intended use. And EOT transmitter should transmit a maximum power. The minimum performance level. You should be able to complete the relevant operation within the maximum latency time and no unintentional transmissions. Common problems we see with this is that only the transmitter of the receiver is tested, because we get the device, it's transmitting, and we see an LED light. And then we only see that like it's transmitting, but we are not seeing that it gets an acknowledgement or something back on the receiver part. This is usually not a problem for other cellular devices or Wi-Fi, because in the device, in the technologies, it's already implemented the receiver and transmitter part. It can be difficult to continuously monitor RFID and NFC. And that's something to do with software in the EOT. So often we get an NFC tag that's placed on an NFC reader, but it can't do it continuously again and again. And we need that for radiated immunity test, where we have to have many frequencies, where we have to test and make an assessment if it functions or not. 868 megahertz consists of many bands. I talked about this, and it can be occasionally difficult to verify correct operation. And this is because we see a lot of different devices that's home built, like radios that's home built, that's part of this standard. And often it's not implemented properly for us when we are starting testing. 489-17, that's a very common standard and used a lot because it's used for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and Zigbee and other broadband data transmission systems. Again, it's normal test modulation and intended use and everything. But what's special here is that in the standard, they say directly that if you're using both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, then you should assess both bands. And that could mean that you are going to test twice or 3 times maybe, if you're also testing unintentional transmissions. Test signal level, radiated immunity should be 30 dB above link failure. Again, we turn the signal down so we see a link failure, maybe using a step attenuator, and then we turn 30 dB up from that. And that is the test level we're testing with. And for the transmitter, it's the maximum radiated power. They actually have a solution for a specific minimum performance level. So the packet error rate or frame error rate should be less than 10%. That could be one assessment. For other equipment where you don't have this and can see it, then it should just be as how it should function, needed for intended use. And of course, you have no unintentional transmissions. But again, there's a small thing in this particular standard where they say for permanently operational radio technologies, it can be excluded. I haven't seen that in any other of the mentioned standards. And that's because for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, it can actually be very difficult for the radio to be silent so we can see if it is unintentionally transmitting. I think that's why they put in this. One of the common problems, it can be difficult to test many transmissions at the same time, because often those Wi-Fi modules, they also have Bluetooth and Bluetooth Low Energy and 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, and what to have running simultaneously. We see some problems during the Bluetooth part, where it can be difficult to find the correct software or companion device, but usually we use a program on a phone or similar. And can be difficult deciding a test plan because there are so many test modes, and difficult to perform unintentional transmissions because they are always announcing or talking and or something like that. Then we have 489-52 that covers cellular devices. For this standard, they say that you should use a base station simulator. So they don't say anything about you should just log on the network, the cellular network that's out in the world. They say specifically that you should test it on a base station simulator. And a base station simulator, that's basically a network that can be made locally. The EUT receiver should be 15 dB above stable link, and that's for all tests. So we saw in the other standards, they only had it for radial immunity, but for this, it's every single test. But luckily, it's not that difficult using a base station simulator because you can adjust the signal levels directly on this tester. And of course, you have the maximum rated power as always, as all the other standards. Performance criteria, you can see some very specific values for us to assess, did it fail or not? And that's why we can't just get a device and say, okay, did this pass or fail? We have to look on the base station simulator and we get specific values. And we also have the no unintentional transmissions. The common problems we see with the 52-52, that is problems making a link with the base station simulator. And that's often because we have some EUT software on the device that makes problems. And that could be, for example, that the EUT tries to call a specific server once every minute, and then we lose the connection. We could also have, if the device don't see a specific server, then the device, the EUT, will turn off after 5 minutes or something like that. So to sum all of this up, the pitfalls to avoid doing radio EMC testing, remember that both the radio link and non-radio functions shall be assessed. So we have spoken about the radio link, but remember the device also has some non-radio function. It could be a temperature sensor, a humidity sensor. It could be a camera or something like that. That shall also be assessed. It's not only the radio. And this can be difficult to do at the same time often. Remember that both the receiver and transmitter shall be assessed. Of course, if you have a pure transmitter or a pure receiver, you can do it separately. But remember, it goes both ways. And this is usually not a problem for Wi-Fi because it's in the technology that it's transmitting and receiving. But we see in many other cases with other technologies that it can be a problem. EUT shall have the correct test software for radio EMC test. So that could be that it sends a message every 2 seconds to see that it functions correctly, or you have a companion device exciting the device. The EUT shall be prepared for unintentional transmissions. That means that we have to have the EUT in a standby mode or similar. And here's not enough to like force it in an artificial RX mode. It could be, but remember that we would like to see it in some kind of standby mode and see if we do an immunity exposure to it, will it suddenly start to transmit where it's not allowed. And then lastly, we have industrial environment also applies for radios. That means that you can have high test level, higher than that would normally be in the 489 EMC standards. And this last industrial environment comment here, that's kind of my step for the next part. And that is combined radio and non-radio equipment. So when I say radio equipment, I mean something with a radio in it, and non-radio, that's something that would be normal. You would see under the normal EMC directive and equipment. So it's a temperature sensor, camera, a monitor, or something like that. But what happens when you put a radio together with the EMC, and how should you assess it? The combination of it requires assessing when you put two different devices together. So product A, that could be the radio, and product B, that could be a normal device. When you put them together, you will get a product C that will need a new assessment. And this is because the radio transmitter can generate harmonics in other parts of the circuitry, intermodulations, and internal clock oscillators not intended to radiate. And you can see, I've shown here product C. It can come in different variations. Guide to, so this standard, EG 203-367, that's actually the guide, the official guide for how to implement multi-radio combined with radio and non-radio equipment. It talks about 2 seconds. So covering articles. So this guide basically covers article 3.1b, that was the EMC, and the 3.2, that's a radio. We will just talk about the EMC today. It will show conformity assessment, maybe make use of assessments already performed, so you don't have to test again. This is usually cases where you, for example, have a radio and an EMC with a cable in between, so they're actually not put that tight together. Then you could maybe make an assessment that you don't have to perform all the test again. It speaks about selecting appropriate limits and test conditions where you have something from both worlds. So you have some radio limits and some non-radio limits. What are you supposed to use? And it helps to avoid duplication of testing wherever possible. That means when you do an ESD test, for example, then you don't have to do it twice. One time for the EMC, for the non-radio part, and one time for the radio part. You can do it at the same time. There are actually some specific standards for this, 446-1 and 446-2. So those are specific standards that talk specifically about the limits and test levels that can be used if you have residential equipment or light industrial, or maybe an industrial environment, or an equipment that should be used in an industrial environment. And this -2, this is the interesting one, because there it speaks about what are you supposed to do if you have an industrial test level, like 10 volts per meter. What are you supposed to do when the 489 series of standards only say 3 volts per meter, so they have higher levels. I can start here talking about the general emission test requirements. When you do emission test on the combined equipment and also just on radio equipment, you should turn off the radio. Or set in non-transmit mode, because else you will get something, as you see here. Here you can see a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi transmitting, and you have a harmonic of it. Emissions within the exclusion band should be ignored. So that means that this high peak we have here at 2.4 gigahertz, we should ignore this. And then harmonics and spurious disturbances, if you have a transmitter, should also be ignored. And that would be this second one, just below 5 gigahertz. And we see this many times when we get a product where it's difficult for us to make the radio not transmitting. And this is one of the things that's often misunderstood by our clients, that they think, yeah, doing emission testing, it should be transmitting all that it can, but actually not. That's just doing the immunity testing. Emission test requirements. So for the radiated emission, this is actually covered by Article 3.T of the radio equipment. So that's the spurious emissions of the radio part. So in many cases, you're actually not supposed to do radiated emission at all if you have a pure radio product. Because this would be handled by the radio standard. But the non-radio function, that should be assessed according to applicable non-radio EMC standard. In the 489, they have a radio emission, but that's like that's something you're using if you can't find any other standards. Then 489 says test according to 55032. That is the radiated emission and conducted emission standard on multimedia devices. The conducted emission, non-radio function assessment against applicable non-radio EMC standard. So use the limit from the non-radio EMC standard. And the 489 standard should only be applied if you don't have any EMC standards that covers this. For industrial environment, when you don't have any requirements for DC ports for industrial environment product, then you don't have to use it for 489, then you can skip it. Harmonics and flicker, that's just the non-radio function. That should be assessed against applicable non-radio EMC standard. The general immunity standards. So it's divided where the radio function should be covered by some of the standards in the 489 series, and the non-radio function should be a relevant harmonized EMC standard. Regarding the test levels, you should take account the intended environment for combined equipment. So this means that if you have 10 volts per meter in the EMC standard, and you have 3 volts per meter for the radio EMC standard, then you should use the highest one. And this also makes sense, because if the device is supposed to be used, let's say in railway or industrial environment, then the radio should of course also work in this environment. So because so if you are in an industrial environment and you put in a radio, then you just magically don't required to conform with 3 volts per meter. It should be the highest. How you pick these levels should be properly documented in the technical documentation. So when you make your declaration of conformity. Together with that, you will have a technical documentation, and you should explain why you've chosen the levels that you chose. And of course, the radio function should not unintentionally transmit. But this is also doing industrial test levels, if you're going with that. And here, this is basically what I spoke about. We have radiated immunity testing, residential environment 3 volts per meter, industrial 10 volts per meter. I'm talking about this because this is where we often see problems. That's this specific test. The typical non-radio EMC standards, that goes only up to 2.7 gigahertz. I know there are some newer generic standards, but they are not harmonized yet. So to show presumption of conformity, that would be to 2.7 gigahertz. But the EMC standards goes all the way up to 6 gigahertz. So you should test to the highest here, and that would be 6 gigahertz. But for the last part, 2.7 to 6 gigahertz, it should just be performance criteria C. And performance criteria C, this is where it just has to be working afterwards, and you are even allowed to press a button or something like that. Basically, it should not get destroyed. If exclusion bands are used, the non-radio function shall still apply. So let's say you have a 2.4 gigahertz, you jump over the frequency area because you're not supposed to test it for the 2.4 gigahertz, then you should still test it because the device has some kind of function that should still be assessed, even in the range of 2.4 gigahertz. Generally, for other standards, it's the non-radio EMC standard that shall be applied. So that's EMC, burst, surge, deep sensor ROPS, and so. If there are other immunity standards in the non-radio EMC standard, so that could be some kind of power magnetic field, then it should also be used and applied to the radio also. I have an example on an NB-IoT device with temperature sensor. Small details, it has an external antenna, external temperature sensor, and the temperature values is uploaded to a server using NB-IoT. The applicable standards, that's for the NB-IoT link, we have the 489-52. That's the one I spoke about before. That's the standard for cellular devices. And then you have the temperature sensor. That should be EN 61326. That's the standards for laboratory and measurement equipment. And the reason you have these standards, that's the 489-52. That talks all about the radio link. How should we assess it? How should we, when does it pass or fail? And how, what should the setup be? For the temperature sensor, 61326 actually has some standards that talk specifically about how a temperature sensor and a remote sensor should be assessed. For example, if you have a 4 to 20 milliamp signal, then they say, okay, you should treat it as a signal. That's one of those signals at 24 volts. Then you should treat it as a signal port and not a power port. For the testing, we would use a base station simulator. That would be for the radio link. But then what are you going to do to be able to find if the temperature sensor is working? Because maybe you're used to that it once every 10 minutes is transmitting a message to the network, cellular network, to a server and recording the sensor. But we have to do it all the time here when we are testing. So maybe you'll have to make some modifications to the device to be able to see if the temperature values are okay. And that could, for example, be by putting in an additional cable, or maybe installing an LED with some special test software where the LED would be lit if it's not conforming, so that if the temperature sensor is out of range. And then a small thing that the standards actually say, if you have an external antenna, then you should remove it and put and then implement a coax signal cable to the radio communication tester or other tester. So that's a little special, but that's mostly testing wise. Another example, that's a robot with multiple radio devices. Details, automatic robot. It has multiple radios. We actually see a lot of equipment have many different radios in it, and we have to assess it at the same time. And it has to be implemented in an industrial environment. So for this, we will have several different standards. 489-17 for the wideband parts, 489-3 for the 868 megahertz part, and then for the non-radio function, we could use the industrial generic standards. It's this 6-2 and 6-4. So how would we test this? That could be by having a router plus a computer for RLAN and making some kind of link. Maybe a phone for the Bluetooth Low Energy. That could be done at the same time. Some kind of companion unit for the 868 megahertz short range device. And here we would create a test matrix, because you have a lot of radios to test. So you have a transmitter and a receiver part for all of these radios that has to be assessed, and it maybe has to be done at the same time. Often we can be clever and try to do some of the parts at the same time. So we could, for example, have a link, a Wi-Fi link, while we at the same time try to test some non-intentional transmissions for the short-range device. That could be something we did at the same time. And then remember the industrial test levels, that the test levels should be higher than they say in the 489 standard. Preparation before radio testing. So what should we prepare? Make a description of the test setup. Always use correct cables, so shielded or unshielded, and typically 3 meters or longer. If you don't know if it should be shielded or unshielded, then use unshielded cables. And then prepare companion devices and auxiliary equipment. If it's a cellular network, a cellular device, the test house will use a base station simulator or similar. It's a Wi-Fi, maybe we have a router we can use. So often the test house have some of the equipment, so it's just about asking us. Then create a functional test procedure. And that's how should it be checked for the correct operation of the test object during testing. That's often only the manufacturer who knows, okay, how to really assess the equipment. Remember that both the radio link and non-radio functions has to be assessed. Again, both the receiver and the transmitter has to be assessed. Prepare the device for unintentional transmissions. That's how do we get it in a standby mode? How do we get it not to transmit so we can do this test? And then the detection of functional errors should be within a short time, because we have the radiated immunity and conducted immunity test where we will take many different frequencies, and within a few seconds of the latency period, there we have to assess if it works or not. And then the performance criteria for the radio function, it's often described in the ETSI EMC standard. The non-radio functions are often described in the EMC standard, but you will always have some specific descriptions that you have to make that applies to your product. And that could be, for example, with the temperature sensors, temperature sensor, how much is it allowed to deviate from normal during testing? And that could be 1 or 2 degrees or 10 degrees if it's a device that's supposed to do that. And I think that was everything from me. Thank you.
Okay, now we have the Q&A. But the time is running, so on the question we have got, we will answer by mail. But before we stop, I would like you to fill out the webinar that we are sending now, and I hope you have time to fill it out. And I have some short announcements. We will continue our ECTROS webinar series with practical cyber security. And I also hope to see you in Herning on the EUT in 2023. And you can visit our stand. And if you like, you're also welcome to sign in sign up for our news mails. Please use the address or contact us. But you're always welcome to contact us if you have other questions. So I will say thank you for your participating in this webinar, and I hope you got some new info. Looking forward to see you. Bye.